Well, thank you everyone for being here. This is the first webinar in our webinar series for 2021. Last fall, we had a series of, just 4 in the fall, but this year we decided to hold these webinars on a monthly basis. So this webinar is being recorded. Afterwards, the recording is going to be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So feel free to check that out. And I'll also, if you request a link to the recording, I can send that to you as well. Just tell you a little bit about Wild Ones, Native Plants, Natural Landscapes. We are a nonprofit organization that promotes environmentally sound landscaping practices to preserve biodiversity through the preservation, restoration, and establishment of native plant communities. If you're interested in joining our chapter, you can go to our website, wildones.org/membership. You can join for as low as $25 if you're have limited income. We don't want financial limitations to prevent anybody from being able to join our organization. We do have a chapter website that will be live here pretty soon. I'll give you more information on that as that becomes available. Our chapter also provides native plant consulting services for homeowners, socially distanced and within CDC guidelines, of course. If you're interested in more information, you can either email us at wildonesozarkchapter@gmail.com or check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/OzarkWildOnes. Our speaker this month is Sarah Geurtz. She is a landscape architect for Earthplan Design Alternatives in Springdale, where she recommends native plant species to the clients and municipalities she provides consulting services to. Sarah enjoys being able to use her background in horticulture to select native plant species that adapt well to the local climate and are suited to the site conditions and the projects she designs. Sarah also serves on the education committee for the Arkansas Native Plant Society, which is an organization that promotes the preservation, conservation, study, and enjoyment of the native plants of Arkansas. The education of as well as the education of the public regarding the value of native plants and their habitats and publication of related material. Today, Sarah is going to talk to us about, give us a presentation, on suburban yard transitions. So with that, I'll hand it over to Sarah and let her take it from here.
Hello, everyone. I am the landscape architect at Earthplan Design Alternatives, and we're located in Springdale, Arkansas in the historic district. And the purpose of this presentation is to help guide you to have success in transitioning your modern suburban yard from non-natives to natives. And I'd like to take this moment to give a giant thank you to Eric Hunt. He provided a lot of the plant pictures you'll see later in the plant information, specific like species. He makes them available for educational purposes for some people. It's very helpful. So I'll also be speaking about not just natives and not just USA natives, but about natives native to your specific region. So in my case, it's Northwest Arkansas. If you're in Missouri, it's in your part of Missouri. And we'll go over how to find those plants. So just real fast, insects and our native plants evolved over thousands of years to, the plants needed to keep themselves from being eaten. So they developed defense mechanisms, whether it was, chemicals that made them taste bad, thorns. And so because of that, the insects still had to eat. So specific insects evolved to be able to eat only certain plants. Like a good example of this, everyone by now I think knows about the monarch caterpillar can only eat Asclepias or milkweeds. So that's not the only plant. Lots of plants do that. And we call those plants host plants because there'll be a host plant, a food for specific insects. So if we don't provide the food for those specific insects, then it's a food desert to those insects. Some examples of this, this chemical relation is apples. They have cyanogenic glycosides in them that produce hydrogen cyanide. Hydrogen cyanide, well, cyanide kills you. So if you eat into apple seeds or the sweet almond, which is not what we eat here, you can die from it. Milkweed and foxglove both contain cardiac glycosides, and they affect your heart. But yet insects, such as this image here of the moth, that's a milkweed tussock moth So, we think of the milkweed, monarch caterpillar eating milkweed, but they're not the only insect that has evolved. So, but that insect has evolved to be able to handle those cardiac glycosides. It's very important to diversify your plants and plant natives to your region. So we need to plant more natives to provide birds with food for their babies. You probably heard about the percent that Doug Tallamy, Narango, and Morrow discovered. They discovered that 70% native plants is required for a clutch of chickadees to be able to raise their babies successfully. And if Doug Tallamy, you all are probably familiar with him. If you're not, definitely Google him. He has a 10-step rule. If your plant's being eaten by insects bothers you, he says, take 10 steps back and all your problems disappear. So between 6,000 and 9,000 caterpillars, he discovered, are needed to raise a clutch of black-capped chickadees to leaving the nest. That's not even to when the parents stop feeding them, because the parents continue to feed them on the ground after they've left. So native plants are needed for this, because our non-native plants, if you think of it, like Nandina, Liriope, your hollies, at least the non-native ones, part of the reason why they're so popular is because they don't get that, they're tough, not much kills them, and not much eats them. So Tallamy found that the birds were going to get caterpillars largely off the native plants because they were the ones getting eaten. So what we'll be talking about are some common myths about non-native and native plants. We'll touch on some unknowns. Research, I'll teach you how to research your home's ecoregion or region and soils. We'll talk about how to avoid or design with some plants that could set you up for failure if you aren't aware of their idiosyncrasies. We'll touch on some signs of care, how to hopefully keep your neighbors happy while you transition your yard, and how to structure a native garden for success. And we'll touch on some knowledge gleaned from my native landscapes. So one of the myths we hear a lot about are how natives are deep-rooted. I don't like generalized statements because you can normally dispel them. They're, across the board, plants they're like people, they're different. And so a lot of the studies have been done up in the Great Plains where the soils are very deep. And those grass plants have been found to have incredibly deep roots. But But an annual native isn't going to have an extensive root system. And what has been discovered is that the depth of the root, it's largely dependent by the water table. So if you have a water table under the soil surface 2 feet deep, your plant roots are probably only going to go right above that water table, because to go down into the water table, now those roots are in an anaerobic environment, just water, very little to no oxygen down there. So they'll kind of hover above the water table. And so now you have a plant that may be in deeper soils with a deeper groundwater, may have a deeper root system, but now it's not. So just keep that in mind. It's not across the board. And we hear that natives are tough, so plant natives. Well, honeysuckle shrub is really tough too, and Nandina is really tough too, and these various non-native plants that are taking over our hillsides. So our natives are tough. They have evolved to live here and thrive, but you still have to plant them very specifically. Like if you plant pussy toes, Antenaria, in clay soils, it's going to die. It needs sharp drainage. If you plant Liatris corrosa, scaly Gayfeather, it's going to die. I've planted it twice next to my sidewalk on a slope on the south side where it gets hot and dry, and it died twice. So 2 different plants died. So keep that in mind. Now, an exciting, we see that birds love they'll go after some non-native plants, such as our Liatris macchiae shrubs. But an exciting study found, the study compared the fat and energy content of spicebush berries with those of Liatris macchiae, so a couple actually invasive Liatris shrubs, as well as some other native and non-native shrubs. So what they found was that the native shrubs their fat content ranged from 6.5 to almost 49%. The energy content was around 0.5%. But the invasive berries contain from less than 1% fat and less than 17.17 kilojoules per gram of energy. So the birds prefer the native berries, this research found, and they actually, the fat is needed because a large number of our birds fly south, they migrate to where it's warmer, and they need in the winter, and they need the fat and the energy to take them down there. It's like the hummingbird. They need, when they go to a flower, they're not just getting the nectar, they're getting little insects down in that. And I would be interested to know about microbes, because that helps bees. Bees need the microbes from nectar. So maybe the hummingbirds are affected by that also. So natives, very important. Purple foliage. When you go to purchase plants, you'll probably see like common 9-bark here. It's usually sold with the purple varieties. And I planted one when I was starting out, and I struggled with it. I have a friend who tried it and it died on her. And now more than one study has come out and shown that insects prefer to feed on the green leaf varieties, what's found in nature, versus the purple. And the purple one contains a high anthocyanate content. I'm sorry, that's not the right word, but it makes it purple, and the insects prefer not to feed on it. So, we're trying to feed the caterpillars, to feed the birds. So ask for the green variety. If you don't see it, ask for it. They probably can't get it, and you'll have to go to another store. But it starts getting the word out to these nurseries that we need them to start carrying the straight species and not fancified cultivars like this. Some are fine. If it looks like the natural one and it has maybe a more squatty form to it, then some studies have shown that that's okay. The insects don't care about that. But this purple, they don't care for. So we'll start out with the research phase. What did your property used to be? And do you want to replicate some or all of the plant environment that it used to be? Can you do so? Development often drastically changes the soil profile. And then is your land different now? And so maybe you want to work with what's there now. If you have giant oak trees feed over 400. It's a host plant for over 400 insects. So maybe keep those oak trees. So research. This is an exciting site. It's U.S. Department of the Interior, BLM, Bureau of Land Management. It's called the GLOW records, for General Land Office records. And on this site, you can find the early 1830s surveys when Arkansas, Missouri, when we were purchased and became part of the U.S. Surveyors were sent out to see what they had. They not only did the survey data, but if you dig into the map that's provided here, it's an interactive map, and you can search and find out, like the surveyors will discuss what they see, the soils, if it appears good for farming. You can start seeing, they'll talk about shooting lines to like a 15-inch black oak. So very exciting. And this is an example of the map of where my property is. And so a quick background, I started down this road, I moved into my house, and I started planting some what I thought were native plants. They were native not to this region, it turned out. And I planted them and they died. And plants generally die on me. So I went out and pulled one of my plants up, and I heard this the slurping sound. And I thought, what in the world? And I pulled the plant up. It was an oak leaf hydrangea. In the hole, it was a 1 gallon hydrangea, if that, maybe a quart. So a small hole, and it was filled with water. So I figured out why my plants had died. So I went on this deep dive of research to find out what was going on in my yard. And so I found out that it used to be prairie. And then with this interactive map, you can then underlay roads and pinpoint your property and what used to be there. So remember, about 1830. And then I found out that there is a preserve called the Wilson Wetland Springs Preserve. I think it's somewhere in this area here. So I started hiking down there and determining, looking at what plants grew there. And I started buying them, collecting seed, growing them out, planting them in my yard, and everything has thrived. And it's been a wonderful experience for me. But during that process, I also visited the NRCS Soils website. It's another interactive map. If you haven't been there, it's exciting to see roughly what your soils are. It's not perfect. If you want perfect, then go get a geotech engineer to drill your yard and tell you. So I've found silt loam, silt clay. But then again, my yard is, was built in around 2012. And so it was graded out and the house was built. So it's not exactly this anymore. Then I found, okay, drainage class, poorly drained. Yeah, I'm not surprised. Then, wow, limiting factor to transmit water is very low, 0.06 inches per hour. And the depth of water table, 0 to 7 inches. It got worse, but it did coincide with the hole in the water. Hydrologic soil group D. Hydric soil rating, yes, meaning it formed under anaerobic conditions, which, judging from the gray soil I found in my yard, yes. So what that means is when you find gray soil, it means that the water table is high enough at certain times of the year that the anaerobic conditions set up, and then the iron has an electron taken off of it from soil microbes, and that iron is made mobile and kind of leaves your soil, and you're left with the color of the clay without that without the iron on it. So think of our red clays of Arkansas, and that's from the iron. So here's another research site. This is what I like to use when I'm like at a nursery and maybe it's a new plant and I'm trying to figure out if it's really native to my region. What I like to do, I'll type in the Latin name of my plant and then BONAP, North American, it stands for Plant Atlas Taxon Maps. I don't think you can see my cursor. So, now you can. So at this site, it's not wanting to, there. So as an example for how this is so helpful, Liatris baccata, we see that sold a lot as a native plant, but it's not native to Arkansas, meaning it has not been recorded as being found in Arkansas reliably, in an herbarium or by records. But Liatris pycnostachya here on the right, the bright yellow represents the counties where it has been located. Now this site hasn't been updated for a while, so keep that in mind. Now, if it's yellow, it means it's endangered, and it's best if you can avoid planting plants. Carex pennsylvanica, we see that sold in magazines a lot, recommended as a lawn replacement. But by buying it and introducing the different DNA from Pennsylvanica, Carex pennsylvanica, that's maybe from the East Coast, then it could breed with our native ones that are being watched, and then our native ones have evolved to be able to handle this area, the soils, everything. So you could be affecting those, and also it could result in some people digging them up. Now, Trees, Shrubs, and Woody Vines of Arkansas, you guys have got to buy this book. It is fantastic. It includes dichotomous keys as well as information by experts. Jennifer, Theo, and Johnny, really do buy this book. And there's another book called Atlas of the Vascular Plants of Arkansas. And it's now available in a PDF format for free. You can't buy the book anymore. So you can download that, keep it on your computer and search it. If you want to locate it, here's a website. It's the Herbarium's website, University of Arkansas's Herbarium. So you can go there. Public opinion differences are important to keep in mind because you don't want to tick off your neighbors and get the city called on you. That's just unpleasant. The problem we run into is what other people see is on the left and what we see is on the right. And we'll talk about ways to help avoid that. I'm trying to change my slide. It's not working. I think the pointer's messing it up. There. Okay, I see a big difference between designing with older lots versus newer lots. And what I've come to, the reasons why, is that if you have an older lot, it's likely already a little different from the neighbors. It may have, the lot sizes might be different. The house types, house styles might be different. The, maybe even built in different years. They likely have mature trees in their yards that with different sizes and different locations, different types. So you already have this element of different in the yards. But with a newer home, like on the right, everyone looks the same. I mean, this is my subdivision. This is what I had to deal with. Not, this isn't mine, but this is what it was like. And it's like a Stepford subdivision and everyone likes it that way. So if you go and you solarize your whole front yard, you are going to freak some people out probably. Also, I feel like with an older home, you can have, you expect to see ripey, mondo grass, and ferns in their plantings. But you can replace non-native ferns with native ferns, so probably they're native anyway. And caryxes look a lot like liripe, and rushes like mondo. So you can already, that's easy to kind of replicate. But at the same time, we need to get out of the mindset of it needs to look exactly like what we think a landscape should look like with Indina and holly, because more plants are not evergreen in our, native plants than are evergreen. So this mindset of evergreen, we need to change that. And it is slowly being changed. My advice is to start small, then if you're up to it, go big. Starting small allows you to see what you can handle, what your back can handle, what your time frame can handle, what your work schedule handles, maybe your money, your pocketbook, buying the native plants, or maybe you want to go and collect seed and grow truly local ecotypes. And that will take a while to grow out, so you can plan. And then also it gets your neighbors used to the new look. And that's the big part of it for me. Because again, if you solarize or kill out your whole lawn, you're going to freak people out. But if you take in a little planting here and then next year expand it, they already see what you're doing, see if you do it correctly, that you've done it nicely and that it's not going to decrease their home values. And then just move on from there. So there are two modes of thought. You can do what you think of, modern landscaping, regimented rows. It makes you think of crops and the hand of mankind. And then drifts and loose arrangement, which gives a sense of nature. It's that the plants arrange themselves. I would say that regimented rows, are easier to design in many respects because just one, like equisetum, the picture on the left here, or horsetail, and various grasses, and it looks very clean. It has a nice effect when you look at it. And on the right, though, you're trying to group plants that are found in nature together, and it's much more difficult to design on the right. I do prefer the ones on the right, the loose naturalistic plantings. And I like a lot of interest in a garden design, and so that's a big part of it. But I also know that's better ecologically, having that diversity. Some quick tips. Consider not planting short-lived perennials like this Lobelia cardinalis. A lot of people talk about putting that in rain gardens, and it grows in the wild along like riverbanks is where we oftentimes find it growing, but not always. But it only lives 2 or 3 years. Mine lived 2 years and then had a fireworks display of flowers that 3rd year, and then dead as a doorknob. But the Lobelia syphilitica on the right is long-lived. So just keep that type of thing in mind. Start small. This is, so understanding how your plants are going to move around your garden is helpful, because a garden is not static, as you all know. It's constantly evolving, and that can be stressful or that can be exciting to you. So year 1, let's say like if you plant virginia obedient plant, year 1, year 2, maybe year 3. Likewise, a stiff goldenrod might be a nice 3 feet tall for 2 years, and then on year 3 do this and flop over on the ground. It's a grasslands plant, and it benefits from being propped up. Mine did this, and I did not fertilize it. Boom, 3rd year, I don't know, maybe the root system was extensive enough finally. Also understand, really, I suppose you're not going to understand this, but it's complex science. Just know that plants oftentimes have allelopathic interactions in the soil that, so when you think of plants growing together, like in a prairie, they've evolved to be able to handle each other's chemicals. And it gives some plants a boost over others. Some of our invasive plants produce allelopathic chemicals into the soil that help them spread out. Know about your spreaders. This is common milkweed. It took over. It's a tiny plant I planted, but the monarchs love it. So I still keep it. They prefer this to my other monarchs. It's actually probably not native to Arkansas. Keep that in mind. But you see in this picture on the bottom, I pulled one up and it just went on and on. I bet that doesn't look like it here, but my memory is that was 3 feet tall, 3 feet long, that root, and then it just sprouts up. It'll come up in your lawn. You probably don't want this one. So do some research. Another one, Itea virginica, maybe plant Ceananthus instead, the button bush, because Itea virginica's it's rhizomatous. It will send up suckers. In some places, that's exactly what you want, though. So try to use plants that grow together in nature, because they grow in similar or same growing conditions, and there are undiscovered root chemical and fungal interactions that aid in them working and in them living together. This is an example out at Chesney Prairie, various plants growing together I saw. So signs of care, bright colors. You still need grasses and green plants when you're not in bloom at the same time to break up the color. But color is going to help your neighbors know that you're taking care of the yard. It's not just gone to weed. Artwork. I found that a rain chain is a great, easy way to add artwork to your yard. You could do arbors, paths, tables and a chair, a bench. Make sure you maintain your lawn. I don't like putting herbicides on my lawn, but I know that by having native plants in my yard and expanding it every year, I tried not putting herbicides down in my yard, and it looked bad. They grow faster than the grass. And I thought, I don't want a neighbor to call me. I don't want to upset my neighbors, and I don't want to get turned in by the city. And I want my neighbors to have a good opinion of wildflowers. So I put a couple treatments of herbicides on my lawn, and then slowly I'm removing my lawn. Oh, and defined edges. Make sure you edge your lawn along your sidewalk or driveway. signage. This was driven home to me by my father, who visited a couple months ago, and he and my mom know all about my garden and the transition it's gone through. And he said, you know what you should do? You should put up a sign so your neighbors know it's not just unmown. And I thought, if my dad's seen it like that, hi Dad, then I probably should put up some signs. So here's an example of one sign I have up, and there are other ones, prairie signs you can purchase online. And fun, interesting plants. This is our wild strawberry. I have that growing along my street. So my sidewalk, my idea was that children, if they found the berries, they could eat them, because these are better than store-bought strawberries by far. My daughter prefers this to store-bought. I did a blind taste test when she was a toddler. And these are held up off the ground. They're very small though. And so they don't get the disease on them that the store-bought ones do. And the store-bought ones are actually bred with this originally. It's one of its parents. Frame your garden. Use shrubs. You can even use more dense perennials as frames. Patterns, repeat patterns. This is Baptisia alba variety macrophylla. I collected from seed years ago in Fayetteville, and a viburnum, and my common milkweed. They all have a very similar form growing up. It's nice also to have some differences. And out of the picture, I have some lower plants in front. Plant groupings, that gives your eye a place to rest. This is Penstemon digitalis. So soil preparation. Are you going to do glyphosate? There's possible environmental effects. Some people would say definite environmental effect. I'm not getting into the science with that, but plenty, if you're doing large areas, it's the easiest thing to do. It will not kill weed seeds. It's ideal if you conduct multiple sprays to kill germinating seeds. Soil solarization, it looks bad to neighbors. That's the downside. It should kill weed seeds in the upper 4 or 6 inches of soil. It also kills bad and good fungus in the soil, but I've read that the good fungus comes back and pretty quickly. But if you're planting something like a legume in it, then you should probably inoculate the seed. Only use clear plastic, and be sure that you either dig in the edges or you pile dirt on top of the edges. And you can also dig out the turf. Keep in mind if you don't have much topsoil, such as in most subdivisions, they just put a thin skim. You might be removing all your topsoil. But if you do this, I've read to take like a machete and cut a square out, and then come under it with a flat shovel. I don't have the back to do this, so I did glyphosate. This is an example of, I spray glyphosate on my side yard. And yes, by the way, my yard's not perfect. I live in it. It's my experiment garden. And I actually plugged it, which is not the traditional way to do this, but I'd grown the Bermuda as an example first. And to see how it would do in my heavy wet clay soils. And then I found a drier part of my yard, and it thrived. I wanted to see how it did. It's not actually native to Northwest Arkansas. There have been a couple reports a long time ago, but it's generally thought to not be native here. And I found that they send runners out, which is great when it's getting developed, but then they start running on top of the grass. And here, every time I walk to my compost bin, they try to trip me and face plant me. I don't know if that happens if you mow it. Probably it takes care of the problem, but it's gorgeous to look at. Soil solarization would have been a good idea for this situation. I sprayed it out numerous times and got all the weeds. And then had Bermuda weeds pop up afterwards. I just have to keep them out. So let's dive into my garden. This is the section of my side yard I designed. And so this was what I did during, for COVID. This was my COVID therapy. I stratified seeds that needed to be stratified. I cold stratified them in the fridge that winter and planted them. and grew them out. And then with what I had, I figured out where to plant them in my yard, my front and my side and my backyards. If I had this to do over, I would have, next time I'll put the plants much closer together. So it all will fill in more quickly. The plants do better that way, and it helps reduce weed seeds. So I would come out, I would go take a handful of 6 or 10 plants and, slides are going weird on me. Now it's frozen. Anyway, and then I would highlight them on my sheet, and then I would go plant them. And then I would unhighlight them in AutoCAD and highlight new ones for the next day. I'm sorry about my dog. I thought putting her outside was a better solution. It will eventually change. I think that drawing file I dropped in here was a bit too big. Well, there. Okay. It's about to work. Okay, so grow your seeds out and collect local ecotypes. I had permission to get the Rebecca grandiflora from the Cherokee Prairie area, which wouldn't, I'm glad it didn't come up because it wouldn't have been a good choice. I understand it's rhizomatous. So first I sprayed glyphosate, that's Roundup, numerous, actually here was just one. So a couple times I had to spray it. And then I marked it off in a 3-foot grid. I took a stick and then another stick with string stretched out for 3 feet, and I marked it off, and then I'd spray a circle, switch it out, spray a circle, and I did a grid, and then I came along and I just connected them with yard paint. And so guys, I like the KISS philosophy, keep it simple, silly. I'm not going to till up my yard. That was one, too much work. And 2, it would have brought weed seeds up to the surface. So I dug a hole about the same size as my plug. And these are 5-inch deep plugs and about 2 inches wide, and they were perfect. These are the deep root plugs, and I couldn't be happier with them. They performed excellently well. The roots went straight down and then just kind of coiled up in the bottoms instead of all the way around the pot. But this is what most of my plants started with. The ones I didn't grow from seed were in various size pots, oftentimes, or every time larger. And then I just put it right in that hole. I didn't make a hole, this big for a pot this big. It was fantastic. And if I encountered gray soil, glaze soils, I just planted right in it because the plant would, I chose these plants specifically to be able to handle my soil. So this side doesn't have that water table I've never encountered. It's wet still, but it's not in my backyard where I found this, we have standing water there. But still, it's heavy clay soils. And well, I guess where I encountered gray soil, those areas did have standing water under the ground. But yeah, I just would take the clay clod and ram it in, make sure there weren't many air pockets, as few as possible, and I called it good. And everything lived just fine. We worry too much about our plants. They can take it. And there. So this was maybe, I don't know, 1 month. I planted late in the season, dealing with being a mom from home. And so I just did it as I could, and I watered throughout the year because it was that summer, because I planted when you're not supposed to really plant. It's July. Here it is again, evolving. These pictures are big, so it's a little slow. There. This in the forefront is Coastal Muley grass, which is a frustrating grass to plant with because it's just a low tuft of grass for most of the year. And then late in the season, when you see it's fall with the maples in the back, and then it puts up its fireworks display, and it's so gorgeous. It's a waiting game. This is it again. And I will tell you, my neighbors, I had so many neighbors stop me and comment about my garden. And guys, it wasn't like little old ladies. It was a good mixture of people from the neighborhood telling me that they were excited to watch what they were doing. I had some people tell me that my doing this had gotten them doing the same thing, planting plants in their backyards. And and it's a great educational tool. My next step is I need to put better plant tags out for people, because I have had people ask me about a number of these plants. So Thomas Ranier has a book called I think it's Into the Wild. And let's see, it's called Planting in a Post-Wild World. And he has 5 principles that are very good to use to help center you on your design. Principle 1 is to plant related populations together, which we touched on. And try not to plant isolated individuals, and arrange plants with community-based planting, so you treat them all the same instead of each individually. And like if you have plants that like basic soil, don't plant them with plants that like acidic soils. So, and stress as an asset, which means that if don't fertilize them generally, they probably don't need it. And if you do, they're going to grow probably very tall and flop. Now, I do have some plants that I'll fertilize, like my Glandularia canadensis, rose vervain, because it's in my front and I want lots of flowers for my neighbors to see to give them a better impact. But generally, I try not to. Principle 3, cover ground densely and vertically layer plants. So you have your trees, your shrubs, your perennials, and your ground cover. Use ground cover plants as a green mulch, and stop putting 3 inches of mulch on your gardens. You don't need to. On my plantings outside here, I put a scattering of mulch, even as late in the season as it was. Make the design attractive and legible, of course. That gets back to the groupings. And then manage the landscape. Don't maintain it, because it's going to evolve as time goes on. So just manage how it evolves. It's not going to be static. And so he talks about using 4 different types of plants. And this technique helps me kind of put the design layers into order. There's the structural, which is composed of tall forbs and grasses. They have strong, bold forms that exist throughout the year. Think of them as a backbone of your garden. So this is Senna marilandica, which I feel like this plant should be used more. It has a strong, bold form that's upright form. Mine are about 5 feet tall, and it remains year-round. It's a long-lived plant. It's clump forming. It stays put and spreads out too. So the good news is mine has not gotten out of hand, and I have been able to pull them easily. It's not a problem to pull. It has a striking form, both from the foliage coming out horizontally almost, and it's almost tropical looking, and like an acacia. And then the flowers of this is neat because they don't have nectar in the flowers. The nectar is held in extrafloral nectaries under the petioles. There is a little gland there, and that's where the nectar is produced. And it's believed that brings in ants and parasitic wasps, different insects, bees, to crawl around the foliage and maybe eat aphids and other insects that are hurting it. Winter interest, it has a very strong winter interest. This was taken after our -19 here recently here in Arkansas. And it holds its stems and seed pods through the winter. This should be sold more. And that can handle the wet soils in my backyard. I found it growing at the Wilson Wetland Prairie, and that's how I learned to start using that one. Liatris pycnostachya, Prairie Gayfeather. It has a very strong upright form. It stays put. It clumps out. It's not rhizomatous. It does need to be kind of propped up. Mine does fine by itself, but you don't want just one plant. When I did my side planting, I planted groupings of them. I mixed them with a Rattlesnake Master, and I think I put some grasses around them. So it's a very striking plant. And then in the fall, they have this nice winter interest from these spikes, these spires of the flowers. Eryngium yuccifolium. This plant also has a strong form. The flowers, as you see on the right, now that was taken in summer, but they'll stay up through the winter, brown, but they'll stay. A very striking alien-like form. It looks a bit like yucca, hence the species name of yuccifolium, but it's not. I see people recommending to plant this in dry places, and I actually do have mine growing it's a mixture of clay and sand next to my house foundation. And I like to give it water as the hot summer comes on. I've found this growing in the wild twice, and it was in wetland areas, a woodland seep once, and the other time in a wetland. But maybe other people have good luck with dry. Tridens strictus is another good structural. Longspike Tridens. I planted this. I collected seed on the roadside outside of Bradford, Arkansas, about 3 years ago. And the form remains year round. Again, the picture on the right is after our -19, and it's just gorgeous. And this also grows in wetlands, and locally it does. And it's supposedly short-lived. I don't know. Mine will be going on year 3, maybe year 4 this year, and I'll see what happens. So far, so good. But yeah, highly recommend this. I've had people come by and ask me specifically, out of every plant in my side yard garden, that's when they want to know what it is. Symphoricarpos orbiculatus-Coralberry. You'll be hard pressed to find this for sale, but do check with some local native growers. Don't take the ones that have been bred with non-native ones. Just hold out or collect seed. The problem is the seed has a dormancy that it takes about 2 years to grow, to germinate. So that's probably why we don't see it for sale. It's a mounding form with arching branches from 2 to 5 feet tall, spreads by runners, which look practically exactly like Japanese honeysuckle. In the winter, it holds its berries through the year. I once found, you normally find this at the edges of hills of woods, but I once saw it as an understory in a forest. It's probably 4 to 5 feet tall, and it was just exquisite. A thematic layer. Consider this layer to be composed of masses of flowers or interesting foliage that's striking, such as masses of color foliage and flowers. Flowers that bloom profusely and may kind of move around as, rhizomatous or not rhizomatous. So think about looking over a prairie and seeing like a flush of Echinacea pallida, the pale golden flower, and then a flush of Helianthus mollis, ashy sunflower, and then digitalis in the early spring. And so that's the theme of the prairie that month. So think of them in that way. This plant is strongly rhizomatous, bold color, it forms a colony. The good news is it's very easy to pull out. Evergreen basal foliage. Mine is about 3 feet tall, but it came from an old home site in the Batesville, Arkansas area. And I don't know if it's cultivar. Supposedly it can get like 2 to 4 feet tall, but mine's only gotten 3 feet, if that. And I've never seen it 4 feet tall in the wild. Maybe if it's up around grasses. Penstemon digitalis is a favorite of mine, the Foxglove Penstemon. Bold form in spring, nice when massed. It's creeping form, but it does self-seed readily. It's very striking. It's short-lived, I've been told. Mine isn't, I haven't had it long enough to know that, but I was told that by a botanist. And it makes sense as readily as it comes up from seed that it's a short-lived one. The basal foliage tends to hold or does hold through the winter, and it will turn the reddish color. It was green for me until we got to -19, and then it turned reddish. Another good thematic plant, which is also a good structural plant, is Vernonia, the Ironweeds. This is my backyard. I don't know which one this is. I've tried to identify it out. They crossbreed. I've just decided to crossbred. I collected seed from somewhere in Fayetteville as a fun experiment to see what the seed came up as, and that's what it was. And then it has a nice winter interest here on the right. The ground cover layer, think of that like the green mulch, or as my friend Claudia Filato says, it's like the socks for your garden. I love that saying. And so Erythrin pulchellus, it's an evergreen ground cover perennial. Senecia pacra, gold cell, it's evergreen, perennial, great plant. And then violas, of a common violet. That's a great undercover, ground cover. And then one of my absolute favorite plants, the wild strawberry. I've seen this growing in a prairie. I've grown it in my yard. Now, warning though, when it grew in a rich area of my yard from a prior owner, for the first 2 years, it grew so profusely and so tall, maybe 1.5 feet tall. I ripped it out twice and I didn't kill it. I left just a little bit. The next year it was just as big. Now, finally, after at least 3 years of this happening, I guess it has used up the soil, those excess nutrients, and and then I pulled them out and composted them, and so that was removed from the soil because now it's much better behaved and I can control it better. When I grow it under my maple tree that's over a concrete storm pipe, maybe 2 feet of soil, and then the tree roots, and it's massive, it only stays about this tall. Might also be part of why I've never gotten fruit out of it in that area, that right-of-way area between the sidewalk and the curb. And then there's a dynamic filler label. This is comprised of plants that are less competitive than other plants like lobelia, and they're commonly short-lived, which can set you up for failure if you don't understand that they are, or that it's an annual, or that it's a biennial. So lobelia cardinalis is one of those short-lived perennials. Cirsium altissimum, I maybe shouldn't even recommend that as a plant, but it's so gorgeous. And the goldfinch use the down from the seeds to line their nests, and they love the seeds. And so I did try growing it this year, and I found out that it's a biennial. It does grow in wetlands, and it is one of our native thistles. Glandularia canadensis is rose verbena. It has exquisite scent, grows profusely. Year 2 might be all you'll get out of it. Its niche is to grow into environments that are disturbed, and it grows great and profusely flowers and dies. But it gives another plant, it's changing the soil as it's growing, chemicals and microbes, it's all interacting, and then something else takes over. And so these plants are good if you have, like a structural plant that's slow and is spreading in, like some of the silphiums, and you have these gaps in your garden, but you won't eventually. So you don't want like a coneflower there that might get shaded out with time. These will be gone, so it's okay. And Hypericum prolificum, I've read that it's short-lived. I'll see how mine does. It's an experiment. My whole yard is an experiment for my work. Achilleum millefolium, another short-lived one. Echinacea purpurescens. Scott Woodbury of the Whitmire Flower Garden says that in full sun, they bloom their hearts out and they die sooner. But in shade, they don't bloom so profusely, and they must not exhaust themselves because they're longer lived in the shade. And I thought that was interesting. Rudbeckia triloba, black-eyed Susan, it's only going to last about 2 years for you. Asclepias purpurescens, same thing, about 2 years. Indian grass, dead as a doornail, short-lived. You won't find that in much literature. I'm still experimenting. It died on me after a year or 2. And then I found a government site, I guess Game and Fish, or one of those, that explained that it's a short-lived perennial. I'm doing more experiments. So here's my backyard. This is Helenium in the front. And then you see in the back some pokeweed I let grow. The birds sit on my fence and poop the seeds out. And I thought, well, they like the food. And then there is on the left, you see Senna, marilandica, and then the ironweed in the far back. My front yard, that when I first started out, it's changed as time has gone on. It's all an evolution. Seeds are beautiful. We plant with seeds in mind. This is Ratibida, I believe that columnifera or I think it's columnifera. And then ironweed in the back. And then a common milkweed in the Torwidas and the Ratibida and the ironweed. And the birds love the seed of the Ratibida, just devour them. This is Andropogum ternarius, I believe it is, a split beard stem. I prefer this over little blue stem any day. This flower profusion is, well, not flower, seed profusion is just exquisite. I love this plant and it's tough. And this is Anemone canadensis. I love these flowers, and basal foliage is evergreen on this, so plant it. This is after a rain, otherwise so it's kind of packed down. This is a Ratibida, another one, and you can see the birds just devour the seed. Another one of my favorites is seed box, Ludwigia alternifolia, and tiny little dust-like seeds come out of the little holes at the top after winter has gone on for a while. It's a cool plant for kids. And my Baptisia alba variety macrophylla I collected, it has these like rattle pods that are really cool for kids. Okay, for adults too. And my Illinois bundle flower, I might regret letting this live. I'll have to see this year what happens. But it's a cool plant, and it just came in, and so I just let it grow next to my sidewalk where it was good and dry. So if you have a lot of water in your yard, just work with it. It's much more fun than just having a backyard of Bermuda. My daughter actually dug this, and then we all helped as a family. This is part of the swing set we used to have in the back seat, my old shed. But it's been a lot of fun to make it's what we call our stream. I live on a small lot, and we have a little pond at the edge with a log over it. And then I've since dug out areas where the water can pool up, and then I've planted plants in those areas. And I made dips and high parts. It's been a lot of fun. I'm wrapping this up. Something I'd like to touch on is I've heard it called the hell strip, your right-of-way strip. Some good plants to plant in that area is Rus aromatica, that's fragrant sumac, the grow low cultivar. It's just like the standard one in the wild, but it is a low growing one. Intonaria, which is pussy toes. Rose verbena, the glandularia. Olnauthera macrocarpa. Sedum pulchellum, widow's cross. It's an annual sedum. Keep that in mind. It's not going to grow like the ones you buy in the store from like Lowe's. Fimbranthus calicinus, that's a gorgeous one. It's a glade plant and can grow very well in this dry space, and it's low growing. Fragaria virginiana, again, the wild strawberry, and Eragrossus spectabilis. Now, I've heard that that will take over in, I assume it's rich soils, because it has never on me. It has not been a problem. Actually, it's gotten so dry under my tree that it's kind of struggling. So consider that. I like to plant plants in a right-of-way that stay about under 2 feet and lower, because while the eye of sight for sight distance for cars is like 3.5 feet, I think of a child on a, what you call them, a tiny little tricycle, and like a toddler, the little plastic kinds. And we have 2 crosswalks in our yard, And if there's a little taller, they're already 6 inches down because the crosswalk has to get level with the street level. And now, you have a 3 foot tall shrub. A car might not see that kid. So I try to actually keep well below 2 feet to be safe. So keep that in mind. Don't plant plants too tall. So I really appreciate you all taking time out of your day. And if you have any questions, hopefully I can answer them.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. That was a great presentation. Really appreciate that. I really enjoyed the pictures of your yard. Looks like you put a lot of love and time into that. So it's really, really great. So, yeah, just some questions here we got in the chat. You can enter any questions you have into the little chat box here. Nate Weston wants people to know that if you're a GIS user, allow the GLO maps or the Government Land Office maps are also available through the Arkansas GIS server. Mary had asked about which virginica species with the long white flowers, and looks like that was Itea virginicus, the sweet spire.
Yes.
And Sue Leahy wanted everyone to know that Wild Ones also has signs for your yard. I think that's in reference to the section when you're talking about having the signs, to kind of let neighbors know what's going on.
That's good to know. Thank you.
And Alan Ostner was wondering if that was a shot of buffalo grass in your backyard.
The one where it wasn't mowed, looking down at, yes, that was buffalo grass. Not native to this area, but fun to grow. I wanted to understand it better. Oh, and real fast, talking about going back to what Nate was saying, I forgot to mention, if you're not familiar with iNaturalist, it's a great method to use to a research tool to see not only what you're seeing and what they are, but you load up pictures on your phone, but you can start looking around and seeing what other people are posting in your area, and it can help you get an idea for what plants to plant.
Let's see. Janet Kurth wanted to know the Edropogon species, the one that you like instead of little blue stem. Which one was that one again?
Turnarius, split beard blue stem. I had to grow that one from seed. I haven't seen it. I collected some local seed and grew it out. Okay.
Yeah, some of this stuff, it's may not be available in native nurseries, but if you know a local source, then it's often a good place to get it. And then it's more likely to be a local ecotype.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of great compliments here. Just people really enjoyed your presentation. I guess Nicholas McDonald has another meeting to go to, but he'd love to get more aid from you. He gave his email address here, nicholasmcdonald@lion.edu.
Okay.
Let's see. Stephen Toth was wondering, will you be making the plant lists available?
The education, I can make one available. The organization, the education committee on the Arkansas Native Plant Society, we, during COVID, when it first hit, we decided, hey, let's do this. And one of our members put a lot of work into it, and then we all dug down into it. And we have a good list of shrubs, trees, and broken down into height requirements. It doesn't include perennials, but it does include the others. So I can definitely share that if he wants to make his email available. Email me.
Let's see, your email address. Okay, you have it there on the slide.
And yes, and I would like to point out our website has crashed, our Earthplan Design Alternatives. But yes, we're working on rebuilding it, but you can email me personally or go to our Facebook page.
And the Ozark chapter of Wild Ones website will have a lot of these lists also. Some of the ones you've created, Sarah, then some other ones from Melissa Morrison. So I'll be putting that address out there here before too long, and people can probably go there to get similar information. Let's see. Adela is wanting to know, what is that white flower on the last slide here? It's like a passion flower.
Yes, that is a white passiflora. that grew in my yard and I transplanted it, and oh my gosh, I don't recommend doing that, y'all. It absolutely took over, and I can't bring myself. The first year it did that, I was just shocked. And but then a fritillary butterfly laid eggs all over it, and they fed on it all year long, all summer. They didn't just have a quick flush, it was all summer. So I had to leave it. I couldn't kill the caterpillars. The carpenter bees love this flower. So just be wary of where you plant it. And the small insect flower is dewberry. It's one of my favorite brambles in this area, but it will take over also. Some environments, that's great. You want that, but not in a small garden.
It looks like all the questions we have currently. I'm sure people can get a hold of you directly if they have other questions. I just want to really thank you. Really appreciate you sharing your time and your expertise with us, Sarah. I want to thank everyone else for being here today. Again, this recording of this webinar will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. If you just go onto YouTube and type in Wild Ones Ozark Chapter, you should be able to find us there. Our next webinar will be Wednesday, April 7th at 11 a.m. That will be Lissa Morrison presenting on hosting pollinators throughout the year. So again, if you want to join Wild Ones, you can go to wildones.org/membership. And like I said at the beginning of the webinar, you can join for as low as $25 a year if your income is limited. If you have any other questions, feel free to contact us at wildonesozarkchapter@gmail.com or go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/OzarkWildOnes. Again, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everyone else. Everyone have a good day.
Thank you, Eric.